Level 1. The Associate. You grow up 3 blocks from the social club. You don't remember when you first knew what happened inside it, only that everyone on the street spoke about the men who ran it in a different tone than they used for anyone else. Lower, more careful. Your father worked construction his whole life and never once let his eyes linger too long on the black Cadillacs parked outside on Sunday mornings. You linger. You're 14. You start small. You run errands nobody thinks twice about. A folded envelope from one man to another. A message delivered word for word and never written down. A car parked in front of a certain building for exactly as long as you're told and not a minute more. You don't ask what's inside the envelopes. You learn fast that the questions you don't ask are worth more than any answer you could give. By 19, you're doing collections. You walk into a shop that owes money to a man you call uncle, though he isn't your uncle, and you stand there while the owner counts out bills with shaking hands. You don't say much. You don't have to. Your presence is the message. You split what you collect with the older man who brought you along, a guy named Paulie who's been doing this since Nixon, and Paulie tells you the same thing every week. Keep your mouth shut, keep your eyes open, and never, ever write anything down. You get pulled in for questioning by 2 detectives when you're 22. They ask about a shop owner who filed a complaint and then withdrew it 2 days later. You tell them they don't know what they're talking about. You're telling the truth, technically. You weren't there for that specific visit. The detectives know you're connected. They can't prove anything. You walk out of the precinct into the sun, and Paulie is waiting outside in his car, like he already knew.
Level 2. The Soldier. You get made at 26. There's a ceremony in a basement, an image of a saint burning in your cupped hands while you recite an oath you'll remember every word of for the rest of your life. This thing of ours comes before your wife, before your children, before your own blood family. You say the words, you mean them, or you convince yourself you do, which by this point is close enough to matter. You're a soldier now, a made man, part of a crew of a dozen guys who answer to a capo named Sal. Sal runs 3 blocks of extortion, a piece of the docks, and a bookmaking operation that moves $500,000 a week through a network of guys who couldn't tell you what a spreadsheet is. You handle the muscle work. When somebody's late on a loan, you're the one who visits. You've learned the exact amount of pressure that gets a message across without putting a guy in the hospital, because a guy in the hospital can't pay you back, and a dead guy definitely can't. Your first real violence happens over a card game. A guy named Richie skims off a game you're supposed to be protecting. 12 grand over 6 months, small enough that he thought nobody would notice. Somebody noticed. Sal tells you to handle it. You don't kill him. You break 2 fingers on his right hand and explain very calmly that this is generous, all things considered. Richie doesn't skim again. You go home and you can't eat dinner that night, though you never tell anyone that. And by the 3rd time you do something similar, you can eat dinner just fine. You get pinched for the first time at 29 on a loan sharking charge. You do 14 months in a state facility. It's not the hard time your uncle did decades ago. You have money on your books. Guys inside look out for you, and you come out with more respect than you went in with. Doing time without flipping is its own kind of promotion.
Level 3. The Earner. You're 34 now. You've built your own crew within the crew.
6 guys who report to you, who report to Sal, who reports to the underboss. You run 3 rackets of your own. A construction kickback scheme where you control which companies get contracts on city projects, skimming 2% off every job. A protection racket covering 40 small businesses along a stretch of avenue, each paying a weekly fee that they've come to think of as a utility bill. A piece of a waste management contract that nobody in city government ever quite manages to audit properly. You've learned the real skill of this business isn't violence. It's math, relationships, and knowing exactly which favors to call in and exactly which ones to save. You cultivate a city councilman over 18 months, taking him to dinners, sending gifts around the holidays, nothing ever explicit, until the day comes when a zoning variance needs to move quickly, and it does, and nobody involved would ever describe what happened as a bribe out loud. You earn Sal and the family a genuine fortune. Your own cut runs into 6 figures a year, cash, most of it never touching a bank. You buy a house under your wife's maiden name. You buy a boat under a corporation that exists only on paper. You learn to live a life that looks, from a certain distance, entirely legitimate. A construction consulting business as your official occupation. Tax returns filed every year showing modest but plausible income. A lawyer on retainer who specializes exclusively in never letting you say anything incriminating to anyone, ever. The FBI opens a file on you this year. You don't know it yet. A young agent named Reyes, 3 years into an organized crime task force, pins your photograph to a corkboard in a windowless office and starts building a chart with your name at the center of 6 other names. You'll spend the next decade of your life never knowing exactly how much they already know. Level 4. The Capo. Sal has a stroke at 61 and never fully recovers. The underboss, a careful, quiet man named Frank, moves you up to Capo, giving you your own crew to run outright. 14 soldiers, 3 separate income streams, and a seat at the monthly sit-downs where the family's real business gets discussed. You're 39 years old, the youngest capo in the family's history. You inherit problems along with the promotion. 2 of your soldiers, guys who've known each other since grade school, get into a dispute over territory that escalates from words to a beating in a parking lot. You have to sit both men down and settle it before it turns into something that draws police attention. You choose a side, not because it's fair, but because the guy you choose brings in more money, and you understand by now that fairness was never actually part of the deal. You expand into a new business, construction site theft insurance, essentially a protection racket dressed up as a legitimate arrangement, where contractors pay you to ensure that materials and equipment don't mysteriously disappear from unguarded sites at night. The mysterious disappearances, of course, are your own crew, and the insurance fee is simply payment to make your own crew stop stealing from them. You find this arrangement, more than any other you run, genuinely funny. You have your first real brush with a wire. A guy in your crew named Tommy gets popped on an unrelated gun charge and starts wearing a wire for the feds within 6 weeks, recording 3 separate conversations with you about the construction racket before your lawyer's instincts kick in and you stop discussing anything specific around him. Tommy disappears from the neighborhood 8 months later. You never ask where he went. You suspect you know. You don't ask that either.
Level 5. The Acting Boss. Frank gets indicted on a RICO charge that will keep him in courtroom for the next 2 years. And in the chaos that follows, you're elevated to acting boss, running the daily operations of the entire family, while Frank fights his case from behind bars, unable to make a single operational decision without smuggling messages through his lawyer. You're 44. You run 6 capos, roughly 90 made men and associates, and revenue streams that, by your own private estimate, clear $11 million a year across the family's territory. You navigate a war that almost breaks out with a rival family over a disputed piece of Union territory, control over which trucking company gets the contract for a major construction project downtown. 2 sit-downs fail. A soldier from the other family gets shot in a dispute that starts as an argument over a woman and escalates into something neither side intended. You spend 3 tense weeks negotiating through intermediaries to prevent an actual war, the kind that brings news cameras and grand juries and ends careers for everyone involved, regardless of who wins. You succeed. The peace holds. Your reputation inside the underworld grows into something approaching legend, the kind of quiet respect that gets you invited to sit-downs your rank shouldn't technically qualify you for. You also, without quite realizing it, become the FBI's single highest priority target in the entire region. Agent Reyes, older now, more senior, has spent a decade building a case, and your name sits at the very center of a chart that now spans an entire wall of a secure operations room you'll never see. You go home every night to a wife who has stopped asking direct questions and started only asking whether you're safe. You have 2 children in college who believe, because you've told them for their entire lives, that you own a successful construction consulting firm. Your daughter calls you sometimes just to talk. You treasure those calls more than anything else in your life, and you understand, somewhere underneath everything else, that you are lying to her every single day that you let her keep believing it. Level 6. The Boss. Frank pleads out rather than risk a life sentence at trial, an arrangement that quietly ends his position at the top permanently. The family's ruling panel meets in a private room above a restaurant you've eaten in 100 times, and after 2 hours of discussion you don't get to hear, you're named boss. You're 48 years old. You run everything now, the entire family's operations across 4 boroughs, relationships with 3 other families in the city, a piece of 2 unions, a construction empire built on decades of quiet coercion, and a network of earners that stretches into states you've never personally visited. You govern differently than the bosses before you. You keep your circle smaller. You conduct almost no business over any phone, ever, communicating instead through a small number of trusted couriers and coded conversations during long walks where no device could possibly be recording you. You've read enough transcripts from other men's trials to know exactly how careless talk destroys empires far larger than yours. You handle a crisis when a soldier 2 levels beneath you gets arrested with enough evidence to face 30 years and starts cooperating with prosecutors within a month.
You learn about it through a source inside the DA's office, a relationship you've cultivated through the same patient, incremental method you learned building the councilman relationship years ago. You have 11 days to contain the damage before the cooperator's information reaches a grand jury. You spend every one of those 11 days moving money, closing accounts, and ensuring that anyone the cooperator could meaningfully implicate understands exactly what's coming. Federal prosecutors indict 14 members of your family on a single day, a coordinated sweep that makes the local news for a week. You are not one of the 14. Your name is mentioned exactly once in a footnote as an unindicted co-conspirator, a designation that tells you with total clarity that they know precisely who you are and precisely what you do, and that they simply don't have enough yet to bring the case they actually want to bring against you.
Level 7. The Target. You're 53. Agent Reyes, who has been chasing your operation for 18 years now, finally gets what he needs. A soldier in your own inner circle agrees to wear a wire in exchange for a reduced sentence on an unrelated charge, and spends the next 11 months recording nearly every conversation he has with you, your underboss, and 2 of your capos. You don't know about the wire for most of those 11 months. You suspect something is wrong only in the final weeks, when a piece of information you shared with exactly one person somehow reaches someone it shouldn't have. You start speaking in code so dense that even your own crew struggles to follow you. It's too late. The recordings already exist. You're indicted on a 47-page RICO complaint that names you as the head of a criminal enterprise responsible for racketeering, extortion, loan sharking, and conspiracy to commit murder, a charge tied to Tommy, the man who disappeared years earlier after wearing a wire the first time. You always suspected they'd eventually connect that to you. You never once, in 14 years, said a single word out loud that could prove it. It turns out that didn't matter as much as you thought it would. You're arrested at 6 in the morning, dozens of federal agents surrounding your house before you've had coffee. Your wife watches through the kitchen window as they walk you to a car in handcuffs, the same driveway where your children learned to ride bicycles. You don't say anything to the agents. Your lawyer meets you at the federal building within the hour. Bail is denied. The judge calls you a flight risk and a danger to the community. And for the first time in decades, you sleep somewhere you didn't choose.
Level 8. The Defendant. The trial lasts 11 weeks. The government plays 340 hours of recorded conversations for the jury, your own voice discussing money, violence, and control in language so plain that even you wince hearing it read back in a courtroom. Your lawyer, the best money in the city can buy, fights every point he can. Entrapment arguments, chain of custody challenges on the recordings, character witnesses who describe you as a devoted father and a generous member of the community. None of it moves the weight of 340 hours of your own voice. You watch the jury during closing arguments, and you already know. You've spent 30 years reading rooms for a living. You can read this one. 12 people who've spent 11 weeks listening to you plan crimes are not going to walk out of that room and set you free. The verdict comes back guilty on 19 of 22 counts: racketeering, extortion, loan sharking, conspiracy to commit murder,
tied directly to Tommy, a man whose body was found 11 years after he disappeared, in a location given up by the same cooperating witness who wore the wire that finally brought you down. You are sentenced to life plus 30 years, a number so large it stops meaning anything as an actual measure of time and becomes instead simply a way of saying you will die in a federal facility. Your daughter sits in the front row for sentencing. She doesn't cry, not where you can see it. She looks at you the way people look at something they're trying to understand for the very first time, 30 years too late. You want to explain everything to her in that moment. The envelopes at 14, the oath at 26, every choice that led from a kid running messages to a man convicted of ordering another man's death. You don't say any of it. There isn't a version of the explanation that makes it sound like anything other than what it actually was.
Level 9. The Inmate. You're transferred to a federal maximum security facility designed for men exactly like you. Organized crime figures, cartel leaders, men whose names carry weight even behind concrete walls and razor wire. You're 60 years old on your first day there. The math is simple and brutal. You will very likely die in this building. You settle into a routine that couldn't be further from the life you built. You work in the prison library, a job that pays 11 cents an hour, sorting returns and shelving books for men who have nothing but time. You call your wife on a monitored line twice a week, 12 minutes each call. Conversations that have grown steadily thinner over the years as the specifics of your old life become things neither of you can safely discuss on a recorded phone. You become something unexpected inside these walls, a source of quiet wisdom for younger men serving time for the same kind of life you once ran. You never advise anyone toward crime. If anything, you tell every young man who asks the same thing. Whatever you're doing out there, whatever seems worth the risk, it isn't. You watched your own daughter stop being able to look you in the eye. No amount of money changes what that costs. Your underboss, sentenced separately, dies of a heart attack in a different federal facility 2 states away. You read about it in a newspaper a guard passes along 3 days after it happened. You spend that night thinking about every sit-down, every decision, every year of your life you spent building something that has left you exactly here. An old man in a cell, reading about his oldest friend's death 3 days late in a newspaper someone else already finished with.
Level 10. The Old Man. You're 72 now. You've served 12 years of a sentence that will never end anywhere but in a prison infirmary or a prison morgue. Your wife visits twice a year now, her own health declining, the drive too long and too hard for more than that. Your daughter writes letters, careful and affectionate, the kind of relationship you've rebuilt slowly across a glass partition and 12-minute phone calls, imperfect, but real in a way you never expected to still have access to. You think, on the quiet nights when the block finally goes silent, about the 14-year-old who used to run envelopes across 3 blocks without ever asking what was inside them. You think about whether that kid could have made a different choice, whether there was ever a single moment where the whole trajectory could have bent somewhere else, and you've never been able to identify exactly where that moment would have been. That's the part that keeps you up more than anything else, not the violence, not the years lost, but the fact that you genuinely can't locate the fork in the road where you could have chosen otherwise. A new inmate arrives on your block, 23 years old, facing racketeering charges tied to a crew 3 neighborhoods from where you grew up. He recognizes your name immediately. Men your age still carry that kind of weight, even in a place like this.
He asks you in the yard on his second day whether it was worth it. You tell him the truth, the only truth you actually have left to offer anyone. You got everything you ever said you wanted, and it cost you everything that ever actually mattered. And by the time you understood the difference between those two things, there was no path left back to before. He nods like he understands. He doesn't, not yet. Nobody does at 23. You didn't either. Somewhere right now, 3 blocks from a social club in a different city, a 14-year-old is carrying a folded envelope from one man to another, careful not to ask what is inside. He doesn't know yet what he's carrying. He'll spend the next 50 years finding out. The cycle continues.